All right, welcome everybody. I don't know what the name of this video is going to be. Probably Jews have no obligation to be Zionist, something like that. That people are going to get say, oh, what is he talking about? I'm gonna have to watch this. I think the video that I made that has the most views is the Israeli flag problem. Wildly disproportionate amount of views compared to every other video that people watch. So I expect a lot of people are gonna click on this video and watch it, and be furious, and name call me in the comments, which is fine. So the reason I'm doing this is because I've been slandered multiple times by people, both Jews and non-Jews, that claim that I said this, that about the state of Israel that I've never said. I've challenged all of them. Um, just provide one screenshot, one voice note, one email, one Facebook post, one secret recording where you came in here and I didn't know you were recording. And the camera was off, you're muted. You pulled out your cell phone and recorded. Show me any type of evidence that I said what you're pretending that I said. And none of them have been able to do it because they accuse me of saying things that I've never said. So no such evidence exists. So that's why they have to slander me and say that I said things that I don't agree with, things that I don't believe, and things that I never would say and never did say. So now you have all these people messaging me, did you say this? I heard you said that. Somebody told me that you said this. They don't have any proof, but they're claiming that you said it. Is it true? Which of course it's not. And I'm tired of it. So I'm going to tell you exactly what I think about Zionism and anti-Zionism, what my position is. So now, if you have a problem with my opinion, you can take a clip from this video and you can show people exactly what I said, and then you can tell me what's wrong with what I said, or you can tell me what you don't like about what I said. Um, but you won't have to lie about me anymore. You'll be able to have my voice telling you exactly what I said, and I think the reason why they won't provide any clips or screenshots of what I actually said is because everything I said is perfectly reasonable and defensible, and that won't match the slanderous claims that they make about me. So you won't have to lie anymore about things that I said. You can take this video and you can show people what you have a problem with what my actual beliefs are. Okay, so let's screen share. I don't think we'll need sound, but I'll click it in there. Share. All right, do you guys see the Microsoft Word document that I'm on here? All right, do we see the Microsoft Word
Yes.
document? Okay, good. All right, so I'm going to try and be as fair as possible because I am not an anti-Zionist. I consider myself to be a non-Zionist, and I guess there's different definitions of what a non-Zionist is, but I'll tell you where I got that definition from, and the part that I agree with, the part that I disagree with. But my experience has maybe not been what your experience is. Online, I pretty much only exist on Facebook and YouTube. So a lot of you are in different groups. You're on Twitter, and TikTok, and whatever else. So you might be around different groups and you hear people saying this. You've never heard anybody say types of things that people say to me. Your experience is not my experience. I'm going to tell you what my experience has been. And my experience has been that many people say if you're not Zionist the way that they are, then you're an anti-Zionist, as if it's just binary. You're either one or the other, and it's not true. And so I think I have a reasonable expectation that we should make a distinction between a non-Zionist and an anti-Zionist. And to be fair, I'm going to present the other side of it the same way. Not all Zionists are the same. I think there is a difference between what I call a moderate Zionist and a radical Zionist extremist. So I'm not going to lump all Zionists together and say that this one represents all of them. So I'm going to try and present all of the positions as fairly as possible. So not even all anti-Zionists are the same. So the anti-Zionists that I'm going to present his position as the anti-Zionist position is called Rabbi Yaakov Shapiro. You can find him. He's got a lot of content on YouTube. I recommend watching any of his videos. He's got a lot of them, a lot of interviews, a lot of debates. He is an anti-Zionist. I am not, but he makes a lot of good points and he articulates them so quickly you won't be able to write them down as fast as he articulates them. So he's very educated. He's wrote many books. One of them is like 1,300 pages. So I don't agree with everything he says, and I'm going to show you some things that I disagree with. But he's a person that you can learn a lot from. And I think a lot of radical Zionists exist in an echo chamber that they're not even aware of different positions. So I'll demonstrate some of that. But I think you should be exposed to every position. And even if you're going to disagree with some of the things that he says, just like I disagree with some of the things that he says, he's someone that makes a lot of good points that I think everybody should at least be exposed to. You should at least, even people that you know you disagree with, at least hear what they have to say so you can understand how did they come to that conclusion? What led them there? So before addressing his critique and my own perspective, which is different from his, it's important to recognize that Zionism itself is not a single voice. There are moderate Zionists who frame Israel as a biblical homeland and a refuge for Jewish survival. And there are radical Zionist extremists whose rhetoric and behavior go much further, equating Zionism with Judaism itself and dehumanizing anyone who disagrees. Now, you may not have seen people do that. I have. I have lived it. So that's why I was saying your experience might be different than mine, but I can absolutely testify that there are many who do behave that way. So, to understand where my position stands, we first need to see both of these Zionist perspectives side by side. I had something here, which I thought I had notes. Where did I say? Okay, here we go. Got it. All right, so a moderate Zionist, which I have no problem. They argue that the state of Israel is the natural and rightful homeland of the Jewish people. They see its establishment as the fulfillment of a biblical prophecy, which is a Christian interpretation of the dry bones prophecy, which was not adopted by Jews until many decades later, and as a response to centuries of persecution culminating in the Holocaust. They emphasize the Jewish people's historical connection to the land, maintaining that Jews have always had a presence there, which is true. For moderates, Israel's existence is a guarantee of Jewish survival, a refuge against anti Semitism, and a symbol of Jewish resilience and continuity. Okay, the dry bones prophecy, this is an evangelical Christian interpretation. This did not start in Judaism. Jews did not start articulating that this is a fulfillment of a prophecy until the 1950s, which is after the creation of the state of Israel in 1948. And it didn't really even become popular to spread this interpretation until after 1967. So, you know, I don't have a problem with people that say that this is the fulfillment of that prophecy, but me personally, I stick to the traditionally Jewish interpretation that we are waiting for a messianic era for that to happen, which is what every Jew has always believed. I said it's true. We've always had a presence there in Israel. That's true. There is always, but I don't view just because there was always Jews living there that those placeholders make it our right to the land. mean, Neturei Karta predates the state of Israel. They are anti-Zionists. They opposed Zionism and the state of Israel in 1948, and they oppose it now. But it's true. There have always been Jews there. One claim that's always made is, well, they built their mosque on our site. That means we were there first. But the fact that they're building mosques means we were not there in any meaningful way. We were not the majority. We were not the government. If we were, we would not be allowing them to build those mosques. So that's my view on that. Um, and as far as a guarantee of Jewish survival, I disagree. What they are describing is an insurance policy, a very expensive one, a very costly one, in case there's another Holocaust. But what if there's not another Holocaust? Then every Jew that dies as a result of having this insurance policy was in vain. Usually they will say it doesn't matter what the cost is. It's like saying, what's the cost of oxygen? We can't exist without it, which is not true. We've existed for thousands of years without that state. I'm not saying that the state should not exist. I'm not saying that you can't support the state. I'm just saying that it's not true that existence cannot be without that state. For thousands of years, we didn't have it and we existed all over the world. So I'm not attacking this group here. I have no problem with people that have this position. I disagree with some of them, some of the positions, but I have no problem with it. I'm not attacking this position. I think this is actually a reasonable position for Jews to have, even if I don't 100% agree. What I have an issue is the second group, what I call radical extremist Zionists. Radical Zionism goes far beyond affirming Israel's right to exist. It elevates Zionism itself to the essence of Judaism and treats dissenters as traitors or non-Jews. Anti-Zionism is declared to be identical to anti-Semitism, which it's 100% not. And anyone who questions Zionist policies as smeared as a Nazi or existential enemy. Usually, they're called anti-Zionists, anti-Semites, or self-hating Jews, if you disagree with these people's version of Zionism. In practice, the radical Zionist discourse often displays openly dehumanizing language towards Palestinians, and it's not just Palestinians. Um, there was a group that I used to be in that I used to enjoy learning in because I used to be friends with the rabbi there. And he said some things that were pretty harsh that I disagreed with his radical Zionist position. So I shared a video that was made by I don't know if it was made by, but it was a Holocaust survivor that was being interviewed. And the Holocaust survivor disagreed with that rabbi's position. So I thought, why not present both sides of it? And this rabbi called the Holocaust survivor a piece of something that I'm not even going to repeat. It's a four-letter word. It starts with the letters SH. He didn't call me that. He said other things about me for posting the video. He called the Holocaust survivor a piece of crap, but used a stronger word than crap for disagreeing with his position. Now, normally, we're to respect our elders. Holocaust survivors, they are usually given the utmost respect. And if that's what somebody's going to call a Holocaust survivor that disagrees with him, what do you think this person's position is on Palestinians? Or anybody that disagrees with them on this topic? Do you think people that call Holocaust survivors names like that are going to give a fair assessment to somebody who was just born in this geographical location that Israel now wants? I don't think they are. I think some people on some topics are not able to assess things fairly. Look at there's people that have been victims of abuse. They're not going to be a fair judge. They're going to see it through this a certain lens, which an outsider would have a fair way of being able to judge. So it's not just Palestinians. These people, which are not the moderate Zionists, this is a completely separate group of radicals that I'm referring to now. This is why I'm not lumping all Zionists together. But you might not have seen them using dehumanizing language. You might not have been exposed to it. You might not have been around it. But it absolutely exists publicly on the internet. And it's not just Palestinians. But comment sections, public forums like TikTok and other online things are filled with statements denying Palestinian humanity, mocking suffering, glorifying cruelty. Common examples include there's no such thing as an innocent Palestinian. Imagine saying there's no such thing as an innocent Jew. Would we tolerate that? Palestinians are fake people. The term Fakistinians is being used by rabbis at Machon Shiloh, um, who platforms people like Jonathan Pollard. My New Year's resolution is to not name call people, including people who deserve to be name called, like Jonathan Pollard. So I'll stop there with his name. Children don't deserve anesthesia when their arms and legs are cut off. If they're Palestinians, I've heard people make these statements publicly. And, they say things like if they want anesthesia, they can release the hostages. Hostages that the children had nothing to do with taking. Hostages that have already been offered to be released multiple times. That whether you agree or disagree with Israel's reason for not accepting the hostage releases, they have been offered to be released. These children have nothing to do with that. So I find it disgusting to say these children should face amputations when somebody else releases hostages. These children have nothing to do with it. And think about what else that means. If you were in a place, you were part of a captive population, it's not allowed to leave, and you were 9 months pregnant. Forget about getting an epidural. For whatever reason, sometimes women have to have a C-section, a cesarean section. That means with no anesthesia, these women are getting children cut out of their womb with no anesthesia. And you have people openly supporting this. This is what they deserve because they're not innocent. Turn Gaza into a parking lot is publicly said, even by politicians here in America. Could we say turn Israel into a parking lot? I mean, they're constantly attacking people who say things like that about Israel, but it's okay to say that about another population. And be clear, we're talking about extermination. We're not making a distinction between a government or a group of radicals versus civilians who openly oppose the radical government. We're talking about exterminating the people who have nowhere to go, who oppose Hamas. I saw one video where there was nothing but tents and one, as far as the eye can see, one building standing. A missile came in and bombed that building. And I'm thinking, what the? And the first comment I see is WTF. So I'm thinking he has the same reaction that I'm having to it. But then I read the rest of his comment, which says there's still buildings left in Gaza, meaning they want every building demolished. So we can disagree about tactics of war or whatever, but I think it's reasonable that the world views that and says the people that are celebrating this, there's something wrong with that. There's a problem with the group that says we don't have enough of this, we want more of it. Not that I feel terrible, it's a shame, but the reason it has to be this way, unfortunately, is because whatever you want to tag onto the end of that statement, but the open celebration of this type of stuff, I have a problem with that. You don't have a problem with it, that's fine, but I do. This rhetoric is not limited to a small fringe. In other words, it's not a vocal minority that the majority chooses not to chastise. It dominates online comment spaces where Zionists gather, and it is rarely challenged by others in those communities. Radical Zionists also spread misinformation deliberately. For example, continuing to cite the original Hamas charter, calling for the destruction of Jews, even after being reminded that the document was amended. When confronted, they sometimes admit that they already know, showing that these falsehoods are not innocent mistakes, but conscious propaganda. Many people that I personally know have done this to me. They say the Hamas charter says they have to kill every Jew. And then when I tell them that that is not what the charter says, it was amended in, I think, 2017, where it specifically says they have no problems with Jews. They have no problems with the Jewish religion. Their problem is with Zionism. These people will tell me, yeah, I know that's what it says, but they're only saying that because. So you knew you were not only lying by omission, but you knew that what you were telling me was false. That would be like me telling somebody, America, it's a racist country. America doesn't let blacks move here. They can't vote in our elections. You would be correct to say that might have been the original documents, but that's not how it is now. The Constitution's been amended. And then me saying, yeah, I know, but it's still that way though. Even though it was amended, they only did that to sound good. This is really how it works. This is what Americans really believe. You would be correct to call me a liar because I knew what I was saying was false, and I intentionally lied to you to get you to believe the narrative that I wanted you to believe. That's dishonest. And it's not just the people that I know. I've seen people that I don't know interviewing other people where the exact same thing happens. So it's not just some people who made a mistake that didn't know. There's many people consciously doing that. At its extreme, radical Zionism normalizes abuse and injustice by justifying indefinite detention without trial or even sexual violence against Palestinians, while lamenting only that such brutality was not applied more broadly. These are not isolated outbursts, but widespread sentiments expressed openly in forums and comment sections. This specific example, there was a detainee in Israel that was raped to death on camera by the IDF, which they admitted to doing. There, there was an outrage over it. The guy that did it, at least one that was in the group, was arrested. He admitted to doing it. He took his mask off on camera. And it was either that guy or one of the people that rioted because he was arrested. They rioted to try and break him out of the jail that he was arrested in. It was either the guy that did it or one of these people that was interviewed that said he should have done it to everyone that was detained. One of the people that slandered me came into the group and said that I said some things that I never said, made the claim, she said, what has the IDF admitted to? Raping terrorists? And put the laughing emoji. Says that's the least they could have done. Meaning the exact same thing. They should have done that to every one of the detainees who has not had a trial. And in that same conversation, she said there's no such thing as an innocent Palestinian because anyone who disagrees with Hamas is killed. So therefore, if you're still in Gaza, you agree with Hamas, even though you're technically a hostage of Hamas because you'll be killed if you don't disagree. By her definition, if you are a Gazan, you are a terrorist. So therefore, the least the IDF can do to you is rape you and everyone else to death, and laughs about it. I view this kind of language the same way I view if you go into an abortion forum and you see late term abortions, there people will post pictures of a baby that was 9 months into the pregnancy that was aborted. And there will be pro choice people who will laugh at that and openly say they have no problem with it. They plan to have more abortions. This is not every pro choice person, but there are people who behave that way. I view this on the same level, and I'm disgusted by it. And I don't want to be around people like that. People that have those types of views, I don't want rubbing off on. Finally, radical Zionists claim that the authority to speak on behalf of all Jews worldwide, though no such mandate exists. They delegitimize religious Jews who refuse to embrace Zionism, branding them as outsiders while embracing secular Jews who openly reject Torah and mitzvot. In this inversion, those who are the least faithful to the biblical covenant are welcomed, while those who live by it are excluded. Even as Zionists invoke biblical language to justify sovereignty. This contradiction exposes the hollowness of their religious claim. They cannot appeal to the Bible for legitimacy while simultaneously promoting anti biblical behavior as a badge of belonging. This contradiction is often illustrated when radical Zionists dismiss religious Jews, such as Satmar, as not even Jewish for rejecting Zionism, while at the same time openly celebrating openly anti-biblical behavior as proof of Israel's legitimacy. For example, they argue that gay pride parades in Jerusalem demonstrate Israel's moral right to the land, while condemning Palestinians for opposing it. Yet they use this argument to exclude the very Jews who most faithfully keep Torah. So the example that I'm referring to here is there's a group called Gays for Gaza. So these are homosexuals that oppose what they see happening over there. Their conscience says that they don't want to see the types of atrocities that they're seeing happening. And so they protest against what's happening. So many of these people will say that they'll start name calling them. How dare you protest and support them? If you were in Gaza, you would be thrown off of the roof of the building. This is the claim that people make. I don't know if it's true. I know there are Muslim countries that will throw gays off of the roof. I don't know if Gaza is one of them or not, but this is one of the claims that radical Zionists will make. Israel is better because we allow male homosexual gay pride parades down the streets of Jerusalem. We won't throw you off of a building. So Israel is the better place to be because you can do this anti-biblical behavior in Israel. It's an anti-biblical claim. But then they invoke the Bible as the right to the land. So which is it? Is it your claim to the land because of the anti-biblical behavior is better than the biblical behavior that some Muslims are doing, executing people for that? You can't really have it both ways. If it's a religious claim, then the most religious people, the most observant of Yiddishkeit, the most frum that there is, Satmar, should not be excluded and told that they're not Jewish because they oppose things like gay pride parades. So there was one poll in Israel where a strong majority endorsed the idea that secular homosexuals contribute to Jewish culture simply by being in Israel, while ultra-Orthodox Haredi Jews, though they are the most observant and fully Torah observant, are overwhelmingly rated as not contributing to Jewish culture. Now, this was an Israeli poll that said the secular, non-religious homosexuals, they are contributing to Jewish culture. It was something like 60% said that. So more than half. Why are they contributing to Jewish culture? Why are we calling them Jewish? Well, because the religion says that their mother's Jewish, so halakhically they are Jewish. Even though they're not behaving like they're religious, they are secular. The religion says that they're Jewish. So they're Jewish, they're here, so they're contributing to Jewish culture. Okay. So then what about the Haredi Jews? Over 80% in that poll said that the Haredi Jews are not contributing to Jewish culture. Say what you want about it. You don't like their work ethic. You don't like it that they don't want to join the IDF. You don't like it that they're religious. Say whatever. But to say that ultra Orthodox Jews do not contribute to Jewish culture, it makes no sense. It's inconsistent. So, are you making a religious claim or not? It's all over the place. So that's my view of radical Zionist extremists, which I have a problem with, and understandably they have a problem with me. Rabbi Shapiro, again, Rabbi Yaakov Shapiro, he is an anti-Zionist. I am not an anti-Zionist. Um, the reason I say I'm not an anti-Zionist is because an anti-Zionist, my understanding of it, which is Rabbi Shapiro's argument, is that an anti-Zionist believes that the state of Israel should be peacefully dismantled. I do not believe that. I do not believe that the state of Israel should be dismantled. I think every country has a right to exist, including Israel. I think that country should change some of its behaviors, that government, which is a fair thing to say. But I do not think that it should be dismantled. I do not think Jews should be exiled. But that is his position. But so he argues that Judaism is fundamentally a religion defined by Torah and mitzvot, not an ethnicity, a race, or a nationality. Rabbi Asher also agrees with that position, and so do I. Judaism is a religion. I mean, we could do hours just on that topic alone, but I agree with him on that. Judaism is a religion. I find that to be the only position that you can't debunk. It's not based on ethnicity, race, or nationality. This is Rabbi Shapiro's problem. Zionism, he claims, distorts this definition by recasting the Jewish identity as secular nationalism. Okay? Judaism is a religion. We all agree on this. Orthodox, we believe that we have the proper interpretation of the religion. Conservatives believe they have the proper interpretation. Reform believes they have the proper interpretation. Even Black Hebrew Israelites, they believe that they have the proper interpretation. But we all agree that it's a religion. Now, it just so happens to be that I have the only proper interpretation of the religion, but every denomination believes that they have the proper interpretation. So we all let's agree that it's a religion. Zionism came and said it's no longer just a religion. Now it's going to be a nationality, and they are going to speak for all of them. They're going to decide who's a Jew, who's not a Jew, who they're going to represent, and who they're going to exclude. They're going to exclude the Jews that they don't like. So he's correct that Zionism is a problem for that reason, and there's many other reasons that he has a problem with. But that's one of them. Historically, Jews were a religious community in exile with no mandate for sovereignty until the Messianic era. This is historically what every Jew has believed. By elevating politics and persecution into definitions of Jewishness, Zionism creates a counterfeit identity that replaces Torah with nationalism. Zionism has often replaced Judaism by reinterpreting its core symbols. Hanukkah, once about God's miracle in Torah, became a nationalist celebration of a military victory. Now, again, this is Rabbi Shapiro, who's more of a historian than I am. This is his claim. He's making the claim that the early Zionist school curriculum in Israel emphasized the Hasmonean revolt and military heroism, but deliberately omitted the story of the oil. The Talmud tells the story of a miracle, the miracle of the oil. It doesn't even talk about the war. So the Zionist curriculum does the opposite. In fact, David Ben-Gurion called the Maccabees the first soldiers of Jewish independence with no mention of God or miracles. There's songs like Mi Yimalel, I guess is how you would say that, Who Can Retell, which celebrate the warriors who redeemed Israel in those days at this time, but never reference the miracle of the oil. Again, this is Rabbi Shapiro's claim. I looked it up to see if it's true. It turns out it is true. This line is repeated twice in the song, and it does not mention the miracle of the oil. But again, as I said, the Talmud tells the story about God, about the miracle that God did, not about not about the war. So Zionism replaced Judaism by turning Torah into nationalism, miracles into military power, and covenants with God into loyalty to the state. Okay, so Judaism and Zionism are two separate things. Judaism is God, Torah, mitzvot, and covenant. Zionism is nation, land, army, and sovereignty. And often the latter is substituted for the former. There's a lot of other examples too where they've sort of hijacked things, um, but you can look all of those up, and Rabbi Shapiro has hundreds of hours going over this. Okay, that is his anti-Zionist position. I'm not an anti-Zionist. Just like I agree with some of the Zionist points that I brought up, I agree with some of the anti-Zionists. I am a non-Zionist. I am not a Zionist extremist, but I'm also not an anti-Zionist. I do not call for the peaceful dismantlement of the state of Israel like anti-Zionists do, but I do correctly point out that Judaism and Zionism are not the same thing. They may overlap at times, but they are completely separate identities. You can find every possible intersection between belief, non-belief, and political stance. You can be a religious Jew who is a Zionist. We all know many of these. You can be a religious Jew who is an anti-Zionist. Rabbi Yaakov Shapiro is not the only one, but he is one of them. You can be a religious Jew who is a non-Zionist, choosing to practice Judaism without taking a political position, which is what most of us do. At every synagogue, we avoid politics because it's Shabbat. We're going to enjoy ourselves. We're not going to argue. So we try to not talk politics. You can be an atheist who opposes the Jewish religion and also opposes the state of Israel. Most atheists oppose all religion. Or you can be an atheist who opposes the Jewish religion but strongly supports the state of Israel. You could be, against Islam, for example. You can belong to another religion and still be pro-Zionist or anti-Zionist. There's many Christians that are pro-Zionist. There's many Muslims that are anti-Zionist. At one point, even Hitler shared the same goal as Zionists, to remove all Jews from Europe. And to this day, some anti-Semites support Zionism because they see it as a way to expel Jews, showing how dangerous it is to confuse a political ideology with the Jewish people or our religion. One anti-Semite even came on to Asher's show when he was doing them on YouTube a few years ago, and he says he wants all Jews to move to Israel because he wants them out of not only his country, but he wants them out of everybody's country. So, in other words, Every imaginable intersection exists. That's why it's so important to keep Judaism and Zionism to distinct. They are not the same thing. Sometimes they overlap, but their overlap is no more significant than the overlap with atheism, Christianity, or any other worldview. The only honest way forward is to acknowledge that Judaism is a religion, Zionism is a modern political ideology. They may interact, but one does not define the other. Judaism is defined by Torah and mitzvot. I would also say halakha, because there's mitzvot to tell us that we have to follow halakha. So Judaism is defined by Torah and mitzvot and halachot, not by political ideology. Zionism becomes problematic, and I put this in bold because this is where the slanderers will omit what I'm saying to make what I say sound unreasonable. Zionism becomes problematic only when it replaces Judaism or when it pressures Jews to accept it as an obligation. I guess I should have added, or when it's used as an excuse to mistreat other people, like calling religious Jews, like Satmar, non-Jews because they're not Zionists. Historically, most Jews were not Zionists, and there is no halakhic mandate to be one now. It is fully valid to be a non-Zionist, and it is unacceptable to mistreat Jews who choose not to accept Zionism. At the same time, I recognize that some Jews find meaning in Zionism, and that's their choice, as long as it does not distort Torah or override Judaism itself. Rabbi Shapiro, the anti Zionist, his critique highlights the risks of letting Zionism redefine Judaism. My position is different. Zionism is not required, and it is not the essence of Jewishness. Torah and mitzvot are. The danger comes only when politics replaces Torah. It's valid to be non-Zionist without being anti-Zionist, and it's wrong to pressure or mistreat Jews who make that choice. At the same time, Jews who choose to identify with Zionism should be treated with tolerance, provided they respect Torah, not ideology, is the foundation of Judaism. And I think that many of them need to learn the lesson that belonging to Israel is not only about dwelling in the land, but about embodying the covenantal traits of mercy, kindness, and the ability to forgive. If you're not behaving with kindness, then what do you expect the world to think of you? If you're out there saying things that I already gave an example of publicly. All right, so that's the first part. Let's move on to the second part. Since Rabbi Yaakov Shapiro is an anti-Zionist, I'm going to give you some of his positions, and I'm going to show you where I agree, where I disagree, where I partly agree. So these are his points. Judaism is defined by Torah and mitzvot, not bloodline or ethnicity. Converts are fully Jewish. Torah does not describe Jews as a race or a nation, but as a people bound by divine law. His definition of that, which really makes the most sense to me, which I learned from him, is that a person is Jewish. How do you define that? They are one who is obligated in the 613 commandments. I agree. This is my foundation as well. Judaism is a covenant, not a nationality. This is why being Jewish is about Torah, obligations, not ancestry or politics. The Torah forbids establishing a sovereign Jewish state before the Messianic era. This is his claim. I would phrase this more carefully. Whether one agrees or not, there is no halakhic requirement to build a state before the Messiah. A Jew may personally support Zionism, but it's not obligatory, and certainly not the essence of Judaism. So this comes down to the three oaths. There's a very good shiur that covers all the opinions. I think it's over an hour long, and it gives you a lot of different perspectives on it. Rambam and Ramban, they usually disagree on a lot. Here, they both agree on the three oaths. I think today they would probably both say that that you would not be given permission to create that state. Although there is an argument to say, okay, because of the three oaths, um, it's okay to create it, which is what they did in 1948. There's opinions that go both ways, and I defend both. The argument that makes the most sense to me is that this was not a fulfillment of the biblical prophecy. If you view these three oaths as binding, um, then I say probably it should not have been done. That doesn't mean it should be undone now that it has been done, but you can come down on either one. I defend people who look at the three oaths and say, based on this, we have the right to create the state. I defend them. And I defend the people who say, based on this, it was a mistake to create the state. You can have either position, both opinions are valid. Rabbi Shapiro's point is that you can't tolerate the people who say, yes, based on the three oaths, we can create the state the way they did. I do not say you're not allowed to have that position. I'm tolerant of both positions. Even though on this topic, his position kind of makes more sense, I do not frame it as you have to have that. I believe you can look at it the other way as well. Am Israel refers to a religious community, not an ethnic or national group. Yes, this is important. Am Israel means the covenantal people of Torah, while some Jews call it the nation. Historically, Jews identified by faith in their host countries, French Jews, Persian Jews, etc., not as a political nation state. So, Am Israel, the nation of Israel, means the people in the covenant. We became a nation at Mount Sinai. We had not entered the land. We were Am Israel in every country around the world for thousands of years. We were the nation of Israel. That geographical location is not required for us to be the nation of Israel. That geographical location was not required by Zionists, which is why they considered Madagascar, Uganda, Argentina, other places. They chose that site, obviously, but even they didn't require it. So we are the nation of Israel based on the covenant that we are a part of, not based on our being present in that land. Okay, where Zionism can distort Judaism, and sometimes it absolutely does. Zionism distorts Judaism by turning it into nationalism. Judaism was never about sovereignty, but about serving God. Again, this is his point. This is where I partly agree. Zionism can distort Judaism if it replaces Torah, but not all Zionists do this. Just because someone is a Zionist doesn't mean that they have replaced Judaism with Zionism. But there absolutely, without a doubt, are Zionists where that has replaced Judaism. That has become their religion. So the danger is elevating politics over mitzvot. If a Zionist keeps Torah central, then that is not a distortion, which means it is perfectly valid to be Jewish religiously and Zionist. Another one of Rabbi Shapiro's points is that Jewish history shows Jews have always identified by a religion, not as a nationality. That's true. That's why it is legitimate to be a non-Zionist. For most of Jewish history, Jews did not define themselves as a nation state, yet they were fully Jewish. That precedent protects Jews today who do not wish to define themselves politically. Zionism and race science misrepresent Jewish identity, claiming Jews are a race. This is his claim, and I agree. Judaism is halakhic and not genetic. He's framing this as, like this is mandatory Zionist belief. I don't frame it as an attack on Zionists in general. The problem is not Zionists per se. The problem is when people misuse race or politics to redefine Jewishness. Okay. His next claim, exile is a divine decree, and ending it politically through Zionism is forbidden. That's with the three oaths. Here I diverge a little bit. I don't say Zionism is forbidden. I say it's optional, not required, and it must not be confused with mitzvot. Exile is a mystery of divine providence, but that does not automatically make every Zionist a sinner. In fact, Yitzhak Breitowitz said, for those who don't know, he's the head of Or Sameach, Yeshiva in Israel, says that, and he's actually where I first heard the term non-Zionist from. Remember, I started out as an extreme Zionist. My position has evolved over the years, being a Rambamist. Um, but he's where I actually heard the term non-Zionist from. Yitzhak Breitowitz, he is a Zionist, but he says there is an argument, a valid argument, that we could say that creating the state of Israel was done with good intentions. Now, there are many historians that would disagree with that. They would say there was not so good intentions with creating the state of Israel. I'm not even going to bring their arguments into it. Let's take Yitzhak Breitowitz, let's take his position that it was created with good intentions, 100%. Yitzhak Breitowitz gives validity to the argument that hindsight is 2020, and that we can now look back and say that it was a mistake and has done more harm than good. This is what Yitzhak Breitowitz says, that more Jews have been killed as a result of Zionism. More wars have been fought as a result, acts of terrorism, Jews being exiled from Muslim lands that we were once welcome in before the state was created. This is what Yitzhak Breitowitz says is a valid argument as a non-Zionist. Now, then he goes on to say something that I disagree with. He says that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism, which it is not, but he feels that it is. But he admits that because of the state of Israel being created, that has sparked anti-Zionism, which he claims is anti-Semitism, which leads to harm being caused to Jews. So this is why he says it's a valid argument to say that it was created with good intentions, but we can say it's a mistake. It's done more harm than good. Now, that does not mean that because it was created and we can see that it was a mistake, that we should dismantle it. That's not what he's saying. He's just saying it's a valid argument to say, okay, now that we've created it with good intentions, it's done a lot of harm that could have been avoided, maybe should have been avoided. We're not getting rid of it. Nobody's telling us to dismantle. Well, I mean, people do tell us to dismantle America and give the land back to American Indians, but we're not going to. And I don't think we should dismantle Israel and give it back to anybody else. So even if you take the position that it was a mistake to create it, that does not mean that you have to be an anti-Zionist. This is why he says it's perfectly valid to be a non-Zionist, which he's 100% right. It is absolutely a valid position to take. But he advocates for the non-Zionist position, but this is something that most Zionists that I have found do not tolerate. They want you to either be as much of a Zionist as they are, or they're going to call you an anti-Zionist, an anti-Semite, and a self-hating Jew. And they're very, very offended by this reasonable position of being a non-Zionist, which is what most Jews throughout history were. It was not part of their daily life. They practiced Judaism same way I did, same way Rambam did, not living in the land, not considering it a mitzvah. So that's actually where I got my position. I ended up from. The non-Zionist term, I think, was created to be more of a Zionist than what it sounds like, but that's where I got it from. Okay. Where were we? the next point, the validity of non-Zionism without being anti-Zionist. Rabbi Shapiro, again, anti-Zionist. His point is that identity forged through persecution. Herzl said, "Our enemies make us one." Zionism defines Jews by anti-Semitism, which is false and circular. So I agree that defining Judaism by anti-Semitism is dangerous and unhealthy. However, I stop short of rejecting Zionism entirely. My conclusion is you don't need Zionism to be Jewish. Judaism stands on Torah alone. If someone finds meaning in Zionism, fine, but it cannot be forced on others or elevated above Torah. Zionism conflates state policy with Jewish identity. To oppose Israel equals to oppose Jewishness. His point is that Zionism should not be tolerated because of how it treats non Zionist Jews and the claims that they make about representing all Jews. Um, this this is a problem. Conflating state policy with Jewish identity. No Jew should be told that disagreeing with the Israeli government makes them less Jewish. But again, this critique is not an attack on all Zionists. It's simply a warning. Political ideology must not become the definition of who is or is not a Jew. There's no coherent secular definition of a Jew. Zionist leaders themselves could not define it. It's completely incoherent what they do in Israel to say who's a Jew and who's not. Um, they'll say your DNA gives you a right to the birthright. So you don't have to be religious. You can be an atheist. You don't believe in God, doesn't matter. The DNA is what makes you a Jew. So you're allowed to move here, and this is your homeland. It's not a homeland. It's a holy land, but it's not a homeland. If you were born in America, your homeland is America. But because of the DNA you have, you're allowed to move to Israel as an atheist. That means it's not a religious claim. But you can convert to Judaism, which means now it's a religious claim. You have to accept the religion to be able to move there. So you can't be an atheist if you're accepting the religion. So there's a lot of circular logic with the way they have trouble defining this stuff. So that is a problem. Okay, it's not coherent. Judaism is a religion. Zionism is politics. Yes, and that's the core of my position. It's 100% valid to be a non-Zionist. It's wrong to mistreat Jews who decline Zionism, and at the same time, it's not necessary to demonize those who are Zionists, as long as they do not override Torah with politics. And everybody who can't tolerate me disagreeing with them in any way will omit what I just said. We do not need to demonize people who are Zionists just because they're Zionists, as long as they do not override Torah. So I often hear that criticizing Israel is anti-Semitic because I'm singling it out instead of criticizing other countries. This is not a direct comparison. First of all, what they're saying there is if you criticize anything that you see the Israeli government doing, you're allowed to criticize the Israeli government, is what they'll say, as long as you do it in a way that I approve of, which they then lob all these unreasonable standards on. And one of the things they'll say is you can criticize something you disagree with the Israeli government doing if you're also criticizing other countries equally. In other words, you can't criticize things that you see the Israeli government doing, which are atrocities, while ignoring what the Chinese government is doing, which are atrocities, and what other countries are doing that are atrocities. You're only talking about Israel. This is absurd. Would anybody say that your criticism of America is not valid unless you spend equal time criticizing China, Ukraine, Russia, Sudan, anywhere else? No. You can criticize something that you don't like in America, and you are not required to spend equal time talking about other places. So I'll be accused of singling it out. Um, and it's not a direct comparison. Because first of all, no other country on the planet claims to speak for me as a Jew. If China is the country that you want me to spend equal time criticizing, China doesn't speak for me. So Israel is different. Okay. And they admit that. Israel itself insists that it is unique. They claim that they are the only Jewish state. That means the stakes are different. If Israel claims to represent all Jews, then its actions are not just another government's policies. They reflect on Jewish identity worldwide. So you can't say you're not treating Israel the same way as every other country. You know, you're singling us out, but at the same time say, well, we're not like every other country. We are different. We do not behave like any other country on the planet. We operate differently than every other country. Okay, well, then how can you say I'm singling you out and not treating you like every other country? Um, so it's far from holding Israel to an unfair standard. I believe we should expect it to meet the same standard that we demand of every country, to respect human life and human rights. The tragedy is that Israel often falls short of that standard. And criticizing that is not anti Semitism, it's consistency. Okay, I don't know if I articulated this in the most clear way, but I'm going to move on. Hopefully, you understood. You know, you can't say that, yes, we are a different country, we behave differently, we operate differently, but you need to treat us as if we did, as if we were a normal country that behaved like every country. Okay, so these concerns are not invented by outsiders. In fact, there is an Israeli poll company that did a poll in Israel, polling Israelis, and the results were published in an Israeli newspaper that found that 82% of Israelis support expelling Palestinians from Gaza, rounding them up and expelling them. 82% of the people in this poll support that. And 47% openly supported killing every man, woman, and child. I want you to understand this was clearly articulated. This is not an interpretation. The poll specifically said, do you support killing every man, every woman, and every child? 40% of the Israelis that openly said yes to that. I don't know how many really believe this, but wouldn't say it. 47% of them understood what they were saying yes to. These are not fringe opinions. They reflect a dangerous mainstream. One rabbi called me and said, somebody said that you think Israel is committing a genocide. Do you think Israel is committing a genocide? Which I have never said. But I said, you know, there's a lot of Israelis who do feel that way. And I brought up this poll. 47% said they want to kill every man, woman, and child. So more than half of the people said no, but almost half of them said yes. And his response was, well, those are not the Israelis that I knew when I lived in Israel. Okay, so what does that mean? You lived somewhere, in a pocket that you were not around these people? I mean, this is a public poll that they said publicly. It was published in Israeli newspapers. So your problem with me should not be that you heard I made a statement that I never made. Somebody lied to you and said that I think Israel is doing what 47% of people who answered this poll in Israel say that they want to be doing. The question is, now that you know this poll exists, it's out there publicly for anyone to find. The question should be, now that you're aware of it, do you have a problem with the 47% of Israelis who said they want to do what you heard that I said, which I never said? Somebody lied to you and said that I think Israel is doing something that I never said. Now that you know 47% admit to saying that, what do you think about them? That's the question. To point this out is not anti Semitism, it's a demand for accountability. If Israel claims to represent Jews worldwide, then its society's willingness to entertain mass expulsion or extermination is not just an Israeli issue. It becomes a Jewish issue in the eyes of the world. And that is why we must speak out. Those 47% that said they want to exterminate an entire captive population, they might speak for Israelis. They do not speak for Jews all over the world. Israel does not speak for Jews all over the world. Israel speaks for Israel. That's it. America speaks for America. This is why we cannot conflate Zionism with Judaism. And these people do not speak for me. And I think everybody should have a problem. Imagine any other scenario. There was a guy who was arrested around here a few years ago. He was caught masturbating in a park, a public park, hiding in the bushes. Now, we can assume the reason why he was doing that there is because there was children there. I imagine, as terrible as what he was doing, he was not out there publicly advocating for this type of behavior. He at least had the sense to say, if these are the thoughts that I have, the behavior I want to engage in, I'm not going to be out there publicly saying it, right? Now imagine if this guy said he happened to be white. Now imagine if he said he speaks for white people. Wouldn't almost every white person say, no, that guy does not speak for me? He can speak for himself. He can speak for whatever group he's a part of, but he does not speak for us. I assume everybody would agree with that. So why is it any different when these people come out and say, no, we speak for all Jews? There was a guy that was in, Yaakov Shapiro will tell you, I forget the name of the guy. He said when Barack Obama came, or when Benjamin Netanyahu came here to America to speak in front of Congress, to convince Congress to disagree with the president of America, to agree with him on the Iranian deal that Obama worked out. He said, Benjamin Netanyahu is the prime minister of Jews all over the world. I guess that guy that made that statement, he was somewhere in the government, like the Treasury or something. He went on to become a prime minister, according to Yaakov Shapiro. So these claims that, whether it's Donald Trump, it's Joe Biden, Barack Obama, he's not my president. I agree. I disagree with these presidents. You're going to tell me Benjamin Netanyahu is my prime minister? Benjamin Netanyahu speaks for me? No, he does not. I do not vote their elections. I have no representation over there. I am an American. Whether I like the president or not, that is who speaks for America. And I'm an American. So they do not speak for me. They do not speak for Jews in Australia. They do not speak for Jews in China. The Israeli government can speak for Israelis, but they do not speak for Judaism. We don't have, who do we have? A religious leader that speaks for all of Judaism today. We don't. We don't have a Sanhedrin. So we cannot conflate these. So this is why we must speak out. History gives us painful lessons when ideology and land lust outweigh religious and moral counsel. At Masada, When Rome was invited in, um, they didn't come in militarily, they were invited in. The rabbis counseled restraint. That means the rabbis said, do not rebel against the Romans. You cannot win. Many Jews are going to be killed. And as rabbis, we care about the Jewish people and we don't want to see them getting killed. Do not rebel against the Romans. And the zealots said, we don't care what rabbis say. It's our land. We're not going to be told what to do in our land. They were willing to sacrifice countless lives, countless Jewish lives, for a vision of independence, and that's what they did. The result was a catastrophe for our people. They didn't care how many Jews were harmed, how many Jews were killed. It was worth it to them to not be told what to do in the land. Zionism today risks repeating that same disaster. We were invited into the land as refugees from European persecution. It was a safe haven from what was happening in Europe. Yet instead of building safety, they evicted the landlords and fueled an endless conflict. Once again, respected rabbis, I just saw a letter. Over 80 Orthodox rabbis signed a letter warning that what is happening does not align with our faith or our moral standards. They said, we're Zionists. We support the state of Israel. But what we see happening is not in line with what we believe the Torah teaches. And they were told that they were anti-Semites. They are fueling anti-Semitism. So just like at Masada, you have Zionists saying, we don't care how many Jews get killed, how many have to die. We are not going to listen to rabbis. We are going to fight for this land, no matter what it costs. We don't care what the cost of this insurance policy is, even if, like at Masada, which is nothing to be proud of. The people at Masada all committed suicide. That was not courageous. They looked out at the top of the mountain and they saw thousands of Jews being crucified by Romans because of what they did. And they all ended up committing suicide. The story is that I guess a couple of them hid amongst the dead bodies. So that's how they lived to tell the story about it. That's not something to be proud of. That was a disaster for us. And there's people that want to do the exact same thing. If that's what it takes, if we have to blow up the whole world, the Samson option, that's what we're going to do. Kill all Jews, we'll kill all non-Jews. That's what it takes. We don't care what rabbis say. We're going to fight for this land no matter what. It's a dangerous position to want to take to that extreme. So once again, instead of being heard, rabbis are accused of feeding anti-Semitism for taking a reasonable approach. So let's be clear. For 2,000 years, Jews practiced Judaism faithfully and validly without political sovereignty in that land. We had no army, we had no military might, we had no ability to affect these types of things, and we lived as Jews. Perfectly valid Jewish existence. There is no mandate that obligates us to endorse every action of the state of Israel, nor is there a mandate to become part of it. Just as our ancestors resisted the Hellenized Greeks who sought to redefine us, so too must we resist being absorbed into Zionism when it contradicts our religion. That does not mean that you have to resist Zionism. You can be religious Zionists, and that's fine. But it cannot replace Judaism. Zionism cannot replace Judaism, which in some examples it has. At a minimum, Judaism and Zionism must remain separate. If Zionism wishes to act in accordance with Judaism, great. It has an invitation to do that. But Judaism cannot be dragged down into a dark place that contradicts its very essence. Our loyalty is to Torah, not an ideology of land at all costs. This is why my position is not anti-Jewish. It's not anti-Semitic. It is not anti-Zionist. Because Jewish life and Jewish values must come before land and ideologies. Otherwise, we risk repeating Masada all over again. So that's my position. I respect and support people who behave like a moderate Zionist. I'm not an anti-Zionist. I just recognize that there's no obligation to be a Zionist. That's my position.